D-Sung stood behind the counter of his cafeteria, staring at the broken food processor with tired eyes. The morning rush would start in 2 hours, and he had no cook. Again. The last one had quit 3 days ago, tired of the long hours and low pay on this frontier station. HFY 9 wasn't exactly a popular destination. It was a dusty mining world at the edge of explored space, where different species came to work and tried not to kill each other in the process. He was too old for this. At 47, he should have been relaxing somewhere civilized, not running a supply depot and cafeteria for rough miners and transport workers. But this was where he had ended up, and he had stopped asking himself why years ago. The door chimed. D-Sung looked up and saw a figure standing in the entrance. She was Telkari, one of the silver-skinned species from the outer rim. She was thin, almost too thin, with 4 arms held close to her body. Her skin had a dull quality, like metal that hadn't been polished in too long. Large, reflective eyes studied him nervously. On her back, strapped in a traditional carrier, was an infant. The baby's skin shimmered faintly, a healthier silver than her mother's. "I am looking for work," the woman said in careful, accented standard. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I saw your notice. I can cook." D-Sung glanced at the baby. The little one was awake, those big eyes watching everything with an unusual focus. Most alien infants he'd seen were either crying or sleeping. This one just stared. "You have experience?" he asked. "Yes. I cooked for mining crews on Telkar 3 before." She paused, her skin flickering a darker shade for just a moment. "Before I came here." She didn't offer more, and D-Sung didn't ask. Everyone on HFY 9 was running from something or had nowhere else to go. That was the unspoken rule of frontier stations. "The pay isn't great," he said honestly. "Long hours. You'd be cooking for 70 workers, 3 meals a day. Mix of species, so you need to know dietary restrictions." "I know them," she said quickly. "I have worked with humans, Kresh, Volti, and others." "What about the baby?" He nodded toward the infant. The woman's 4 arms tightened slightly, a protective gesture. "She will not be trouble. She is quiet. I can work with her on my back." D-Sung studied them both. The woman looked desperate but not dangerous. The baby continued to watch him with those unnervingly aware eyes. He should probably ask more questions, check references, do this properly. But he was tired, and he needed a cook by tomorrow morning. "What's your name?" he asked. "Vixla. My daughter is Nim." D-Sung. He sighed and made his decision. "All right, trial period 1 month. Room and board included plus basic salary. You mess up, you're out. Understood?" Relief flooded Vixla's face. Her skin brightened just slightly. "Yes, thank you. I will not disappoint you." "Rooms in the back, small but clean. I'll show you the kitchen now." He led her through the cafeteria, past the worn tables and mismatched chairs. The kitchen was industrial-sized but old. Everything worked, barely. Vixla moved through the space with surprising confidence despite her nervousness. Her lower set of arms checked equipment, while her upper arms kept Nim secure. Breakfast starts at 0600, Sung explained. Workers come in shifts. Lunch at 12, dinner at 18. Late shift gets midnight meal. Keep it simple but filling. They work hard. I understand. Dietary restrictions are posted there. He pointed to a screen on the wall. Update daily. Some species have allergies that'll kill them, so pay attention. Vixla nodded seriously, her large eyes scanning the information. As Sung showed her the storage areas, he became aware of the baby watching him. Really watching him. Not the vague, unfocused stare of an infant, but something more deliberate. The baby's eyes were amber-colored with tiny flecks of gold that caught the light. Something about those eyes bothered him, but he couldn't identify what. "How old?" he asked, nodding toward Nim. 4 months, still very small. Vixla's voice carried a mother's worry. "She seems healthy enough." "Yes, Telkari infants are fragile, but she is strong." Pride mixed with fear in Vixla's tone. Sung showed her to the small room that would be hers. It had been used for storage until yesterday when he'd hastily cleared it out. A narrow bed, a small table, and a portable cleaning unit. Not much, but private. "It's not," he started. "It is perfect," Vixla interrupted, and he could hear she meant it. "Thank you. Start tomorrow at 0530. I'll be here to help you through the first day." She bowed, a Telkari gesture of respect. "I will not fail you." After she left to settle in, Sung returned to the counter. He opened his scheduling program and added her name to the roster. Vixla. It was done. He should have felt relieved. The immediate problem was solved. But those amber eyes with gold flecks kept floating in his mind, stirring something deep in his memory that he'd spent 12 years trying to bury. The next morning, Vixla appeared exactly at 0530. Nim was strapped to her back again, awake and quiet. The baby's eyes found Sung immediately and stayed on him as Vixla began working. "Show me what you need for breakfast," Vixla said. Sung walked her through the menu. Protein cakes for humans, mineral slurry for the creche, grain bowls with supplements for the Volti. Simple food, but it had to be right. Vixla worked with practiced efficiency. Her 4 arms were an advantage in the kitchen. She could stir 3 pots while checking temperature on a 4th dish. She moved quietly, almost floating between stations. The workers started arriving at 6. They lined up, taking trays and sitting at tables. Some stared at Vixla with curiosity, others with suspicion. A few made comments in languages they thought she wouldn't understand. Sung watched it all carefully. He caught one human worker, a man named Su, muttering something crude about charity cases as he passed. Sung stepped forward. "You got a problem with the food?" he asked coldly. Su looked at him in surprise. "No, boss, just—" "Then eat and get to work." Su shut his mouth and moved to a table. The message was clear to everyone watching. The new cook was under Sung's protection. Throughout the morning rush, baby Nim stayed quiet on her mother's back. But every time Sung moved through the kitchen, those amber eyes with gold flecks followed him, watching, studying, knowing something. By the time the breakfast rush ended, Sung had to admit Vixla was good, better than good. The food was hot, properly portioned, and exactly what each species needed. No complaints had come back from the dining area. "You did well," he told her. Vixla's skin brightened with relief. "Thank you, I was nervous." "Don't be, you know what you're doing." He left her to clean the kitchen and prepare for lunch. But as he walked away, he glanced back and found Nim still watching him with those impossibly aware eyes. Those eyes that reminded him of someone he'd lost a long time ago. Someone whose memory he'd tried so hard to bury that seeing it reflected in an alien infant's gaze felt like a wound reopening after 12 years of healing. Sung turned away quickly and went back to his office. He had inventory to check and supplies to order. Normal work, safe work, work that didn't make him remember things he'd sworn to forget. But even with the door closed, he could still see those amber eyes with gold flecks in his mind, and they wouldn't let him go. The first week passed in a blur of meal preparation and routine. Vixla settled into the rhythm of the cafeteria like she'd been there for years. She arrived early every morning, Nim strapped to her back, and worked until late evening without complaint. The quality of the food improved so much that workers actually started showing up on time for meals. Sung watched her from a distance. He noticed things. The way she flinched when someone dropped a tray too loudly. How she positioned herself so her back was always to a wall. The protective way she constantly checked on Nim, even though the baby never cried or fussed. These were signs of someone who'd been hurt and was still afraid. On the 8th day, during the quiet hour between lunch and dinner prep, Vixla finally spoke about herself without being asked. "My mate died 6 months ago," she said quietly, chopping vegetables with her lower arms while her upper arms held Nim. "Mining accident on Telkar 3. Cave collapse." Sung paused in his inventory count. "I'm sorry." "His clan blamed me." Her skin flickered darker. "I am from lower caste. They said I brought bad fortune. They took everything. His savings, our home, even his death benefit. I had nothing except Nim." That's not right. It is Telkari way. Widow has no rights without family support. She continued chopping, her movements mechanical. I took what little I could carry and came here. Keshar 9 does not ask many questions. No, Sung agreed. It doesn't. You do not ask questions either. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Everyone here is running from something. That's frontier station life. I figure if you want me to know something, you'll tell me. Vixla looked at him with those large reflective eyes. You are kind. That is rare. Sung shrugged and went back to his counting. He wasn't kind. He just understood what it meant to lose everything and need a place where no one asked about the past. But that night, alone in his quarters, the past came back anyway. Nim's eyes wouldn't leave his thoughts. Every time he'd seen the baby that day, those amber eyes with gold flecks had tracked him with that same unsettling awareness. And every time, he felt the same stir of memory he'd been fighting for 12 years. His daughter had eyes like that. HeHFY, 7 years old when she died. Amber eyes with gold flecks that seemed to see right through him. She'd look at him across the dinner table and smile, and he'd felt like the most important person in the universe. HeHFY and her mother, Bora, had died in a transport crash. Instant. No suffering, they'd told him. But Sung had suffered enough for all three of them. He'd spent 2 years on Earth after the accident, moving through life like a ghost. Then he'd applied for frontier work and ran as far from civilization as he could get, to places where no one knew him, where there were no schools full of children, no parks with families, no reminders of what he'd lost. He'd destroyed every photo, gave away their belongings, moved to a place where holidays didn't exist and time was measured only in work shifts. For 12 years, it had worked. The pain had dulled to a background ache he could ignore most days. But now, seeing Nim's eyes every day, the old wound felt fresh again. Sung sat in the dark of his quarters and let himself remember for the first time in years. HeHFY's laugh, Bora's voice calling them for dinner, the feeling of his daughter's small hand in his as they walked to school. His chest hurt like someone had reopened an old injury. The next few weeks brought more changes. Vixla became less nervous, more comfortable. She started experimenting with the menu, adding Telkari spices to human dishes, creating fusion meals that surprised everyone with how good they were. The cafeteria became busier. Workers lingered over meals, talking more. Some even brought cards and played games between shifts. The space that had been just a feeding station was becoming something else. A gathering place. A community. Sung found himself spending more time there too, instead of hiding in his office. He'd sit at the counter and watch Vixla work, or listen to the workers talk. Sometimes Vixla would ask him questions about human culture, and he'd answer them. Small conversations that gradually became less small. "Why are you here?" she asked one evening after the dinner rush. "On Keshyar 9, you are educated. You could manage stations in better locations. Could ask you the same thing. I told you my reason, necessity." D-Sung was quiet. Then, surprising himself, he spoke. "I lost my family 12 years ago, wife and daughter. I needed to be somewhere they'd never been, somewhere with no memories." Vixla's skin shifted to a softer shade, a Telkari expression of sympathy. "And did it work, being here?" "For a while." She understood what he didn't say, that something had changed recently. She glanced at Nim, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. "She reminds you." "Yeah." "I am sorry, I can." "No," he cut her off. "It's not your fault, it's just life." They worked in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind between people who understood loss. Gil Su and two other workers started making comments again, not about the food, which was excellent, but about Vixla herself, about her being a widow, about her taking up space, about charity cases lowering station standards. The comments were always made just loud enough for others to hear, but not loud enough to be official complaints. D-Sung had dealt with men like Gil Su before, bullies who picked on whoever seemed weakest. He'd been letting it slide, hoping it would stop on its own. It didn't stop. One afternoon, he overheard Gil Su telling another worker, "She should be grateful we let her kind stay here at all. Widow and a brat. Dead weight." Something snapped in D-Sung. He crossed the cafeteria in 5 long strides and grabbed Gil Su by the front of his work suit. "Say that again," D-Sung said quietly. The entire cafeteria went silent. Gil Su's face went pale. "Boss, I was just being a piece of garbage." "Yeah, I noticed." D-Sung's grip tightened. "Vixla works harder than anyone here, including you. She's here legally, pays her way, and does her job. You got a problem with that?" "No, boss." "Then keep your mouth shut about her. Understood?" "Yes, boss." D-Sung released him and looked around at the other watching faces. "Anyone else got comments? Now's the time." A silence. "Good. Eat your food and get back to work." The cafeteria slowly returned to normal noise levels. D-Sung walked back to the counter where Vixla stood frozen, all 4 arms trembling slightly. "Oh, you didn't have to," she started. "Yes, I did." He kept his voice low. "You're part of this station now. That means you're under my protection. Anyone has a problem with that, they can file a complaint with corporate." Vixla's skin brightened with emotion, gratitude, relief, something else he couldn't identify. Thank you," she whispered. That night, around 2 in the morning, someone pounded on D-Sung's door. He opened it to find Vixla standing there, all four arms clutching Nim to her chest. The baby's skin had a strange gray tint, and even in the dim hallway light, he could see she was sick. "She has fever," Vixla said, voice shaking. "Very high. Tell Kari infants when they get fever they—" She couldn't finish. "Get dressed. Medical center now." The station's medical center was small and understaffed, but Dr. Hyun-woo was competent. He examined Nim quickly, running scanners over her small body while Vixla hovered nearby, radiating panic. "Respiratory infection," Dr. Hyun-woo said finally. "Common in Telkari infants in dry environments. Treatable, but she needs medication immediately. The good news is we caught it early." "How much?" Vixla asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Hyun-woo checked his console. "Treatment course will be 800 credits." Vixla's skin went dark. "I do not have." "Put it on my account," Sung interrupted. Both Vixla and Dr. Hyun-woo stared at him. "Boss, that's a lot of—" Dr. Hyun-woo started. "My account. Now, get her the medicine." Dr. Hyun-woo nodded and prepared the treatment. Vixla looked at Sung with those large eyes filled with something that made his chest tight. "I will pay you back," she said. "Every credit, I promise." "We'll figure it out later. Take care of your daughter." As Dr. Hyun-woo administered the medication and Nim's color slowly improved, Sung stood against the wall and watched, the fierce love on Vixla's face as she held her baby, the relief when Nim's breathing eased. He remembered standing in a hospital once, holding HeHFY after she'd broken her arm. The same fear, the same desperate love. He'd forgotten what that felt like. And part of him had wanted to forget. But watching Vixla and Nim now, he realized something. The memories didn't have to be only pain. They could be something else too. Something that reminded him he'd once been capable of caring deeply for someone. Maybe running from that hadn't been healing. Maybe it had just been hiding. After Nim recovered, something shifted between Sung and Vixla. The walls came down slowly, like ice melting under spring sun. Vixla began talking more, sharing pieces of her culture and life. She taught Sung phrases in Telkari, showed him how the color changes in her skin communicated emotion, explained the meaning behind Telkari traditions. "When Telkari infant is born," she said one afternoon while preparing dinner, "the parent shows baby to the sky at sunset. We believe the ancestors watch from the stars and bless the child." "Did you do that with Nim?" "Yes, the day before my mate died." Her skin flickered darker. "He held her up and asked ancestors to protect her. 3 days later he was gone." "I'm sorry." "Life is uncertain. We do not control when it ends." She continued her work with 3 arms while the 4th gently stroked Nim's head. but we control how we honor those who came before. D-Sung thought about that. He'd never honored Bora and HeHFY. He'd just run from their memory. "Can I ask you something?" Vixla said carefully. "About your family." He tensed but nodded. "How did they die?" "Transport crash, coming back from visiting Bora's parents. The pilot had a heart attack mid-flight. Ship went down. They said it was instant." "And you were not with them?" "I was working. Some corporate meeting I thought was important." The old guilt rose up. "I should have been there." Vixla's 4 hands stopped moving. "If you were there, you would also be dead. Your daughter would want you alive." "How do you know?" "Because that is what parents want. We want our children to live, even when we cannot." She looked down at Nim. "If I died tomorrow, I would want Nim to be safe and happy, not suffering because of my death." It was such a simple truth, but D-Sung had never let himself think it. He'd been too busy drowning in guilt and pain. "HeHFY had eyes like Nim's," he said quietly. "Same color, that's why when I first saw Nim it hurt. And now, it still hurts, but different." Vixla's skin brightened gently. "Different is good. Pain that teaches us is better than pain that destroys us." Over the following weeks, the cafeteria continued to transform. Vixla started adding traditional Telkari dishes to the menu. She made thin, silver bread that dissolved on the tongue, a sweet paste made from minerals that the creche workers loved, spiced grain bowls that humans found surprisingly addictive. The workers noticed. They started requesting specific dishes, trading shifts to arrive when certain meals were served. The cafeteria became crowded in ways it never had before. D-Sung found himself drawn into it too. He started helping Vixla more, learning her recipes, understanding the chemistry of multi-species cooking. They worked side by side, and their conversations grew longer and deeper. She told him about growing up in the lower caste on Telkar 3, how she'd learned to cook by watching the upper caste kitchens from outside, how she'd practiced in secret until she was good enough to get hired by a mining company. He told her about Earth, about cities and oceans and forests, about raising HeHFY, teaching her to read, watching her grow. The memories that used to only bring pain now carried warmth too. "You were good father," Vixla said one evening. "I can hear it in how you speak of her." "I tried to be." "That is all parents can do, try our best." Nim was growing. At 6 months old, she was becoming more active, making sounds, reaching for things with her small hands. D-Sung found himself paying attention to her development, even asking questions about Telkari infant milestones. "She is ahead," Vixla said proudly. "Already trying to communicate through skin color, see?" She pointed to a light pink flush on Nim's forehead. "That means happy." What does dark gray mean? Scared or sick. Blue means curious. Silver is normal. We have many shades. How do you keep track? Same way you keep track of human facial expressions. You grow up knowing them. One afternoon, while Vixla was busy with lunch prep, Nim started fussing. It was the first time Sung had heard her make any real noise of distress. Vixla was elbow-deep in 3 different pots and couldn't stop. "I will get her in moment," she started. "I got it," Sung heard himself say. He approached Nim carefully. The baby looked at him with those knowing amber eyes, and for a moment he froze. Then, slowly, he reached out and picked her up, supporting her head the way he remembered doing with HeHFY. Nim was light, almost fragile feeling. Her skin was cool and smooth. She studied his face intently, and her forehead shifted to light blue, curious. "Hey there," Sung said softly. "Your mom's busy. You okay?" Nim made a small sound, not quite a coo, but close. Her tiny hand reached up and touched his face, exploring. The gesture was so innocent, so trusting, that something cracked open in Sung's chest. He'd forgotten what it felt like to hold a child, to be trusted so completely by something so small and helpless. "Boss has her," Vixla called without looking up. "Yeah, we're good." He walked around the kitchen with Nim, showing her things, talking to her in a soft voice. The baby's color shifted to light pink. Happy. When Vixla finally had a moment to take Nim back, she paused and looked at Sung with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you," she said. "Not many would touch Telkari infant. Some species think we are unclean." "Oh, that's stupid." "Yes, but common." She took Nim gently. "You are comfortable with her now." He realized she was right. The pain he'd felt looking at Nim had eased into something else. Not gone, but transformed. He could see Nim as herself now, not just as a reminder of what he'd lost. That evening, Sung did something he hadn't done in 12 years. He went to his personal storage locker and pulled out a small box he'd sealed away. Inside were a few items he hadn't been able to destroy. HeHFY's favorite drawing of their family, Bora's wedding ring, a photo of the 3 of them at a park, laughing. He took them back to his quarters and placed them on his desk, not hidden, just there. It hurt to look at them, but it was the kind of hurt that meant healing, not breaking. 2 days later, everything changed. A man arrived at the station in an expensive suit. His ID badge read Team Min, Corporate Inspector. He was human, probably in his 30s, with cold eyes and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to his hand. "Station efficiency audit," he announced to Sung. "Standard procedure. I'll need access to all records, financial statements, and personnel files." Sung didn't like him immediately, but audits were part of frontier station life. "My office is this way." For 3 days, Team Min pored over everything. He questioned workers, checked inventory against records, reviewed supply orders. He was thorough and cold, treating everyone like numbers on a spreadsheet. On the third day, he called Sung into the office. "I've noticed some irregularities," T-Min said, tapping his screen. "You paid 800 credits for medical treatment for a non-family member, the Telkari cook's infant." "That's right. That station funds used for personal matters." "My personal funds, I transferred them." "Still questionable judgment." T-Min made a note. "I also see you've been allowing the Telkari and her child to live in station quarters rent-free. Room and board is part of her compensation." "For her, yes, not for dependents." Another note. "And her work permit is temporary, 3-month provisional status. She'll need permanent approval to stay." Something cold settled in Sung's gut. "She's been here 6 weeks. She's doing excellent work. Everyone's happy with the food." "That's not the issue. The issue is whether station resources should be supporting aliens who may not have long-term value." T-Min looked up from his screen. "Especially widows with children. That's a liability." "Liability? What happens if the child gets sick again? More medical expenses. What if the mother can't work? Do we support them indefinitely?" T-Min's tone was reasonable, but his eyes were ice. "Corporate policy is clear. Resources should benefit citizens first." "She's not taking anything from citizens. She's working hard and earning her keep." "For now, but this is a short-term permit situation. I'll need to file a report about resource allocation." T-Min stood. "Don't let emotions compromise your judgment, station manager. This is business." After T-Min left, Sung sat in his office, staring at the wall. He knew exactly what that conversation meant. T-Min was going to recommend against extending Vixla's permit. She'd be deported. He found Vixla in the kitchen, preparing the evening meal. Nim was on her back, as always, watching the world with those amber eyes. "We need to talk," Sung said. From the look on his face, Vixla understood immediately. Her skin shifted dark. "It is the inspector," she said quietly. "He will not approve my permit." "I don't know that yet. I know how these things work. I am widow. I have child. I am expensive risk." She continued working, but her hands shook slightly. "How long do I have?" "He hasn't filed the report yet. Maybe I can." "No." She turned to face him fully. "You have already risked much for me. Your job, your reputation. I will not let you lose more." "Vixla, I will begin looking for other stations. Someone will need cook." She didn't sound convinced. Sung wanted to argue, to promise everything would be fine. But he'd seen how corporate worked. Once an inspector flagged something, the decision was usually already made. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Vixla and Nim being forced to leave, about them going somewhere less safe, less stable, about Nim's amber eyes looking at him one last time before disappearing from his life. Like HeHFY had disappeared. And for the first time in 12 years, Sung realized something important. He didn't want to lose someone again. Not if he could fight to prevent it. The official notice arrived 2 weeks later. Clean, corporate language that meant one thing. Vixla had 30 days to leave Cashiar 9 station. Her permit extension had been denied. No specific reason given, just a reference to resource allocation protocols and provisional status review. Sung read it 3 times, anger building with each word. He knew Team Min had done this. The inspector had left the station a week ago with promises that his report would be thorough and fair. This was what fair meant to corporate, getting rid of anyone who might cost them money. He found Vixla in the kitchen during the quiet afternoon hour. She was sitting on a stool, Nim in her arms, staring at her own copy of the notice. Her skin was the darkest gray he'd ever seen it. Not just sad, defeated. 30 days, she said without looking up. I have nowhere to go. Sung pulled up a chair and sat across from her. What about other stations? You're a great cook. Someone will hire you. I sent applications to 17 stations last week. Her voice was hollow. 3 responded. All said no when they learned about Nim. No one wants single mother with infant. Too risky. Your home world. Telkar 3 will not take me without family sponsor. I have no family there now. My mate's clan made certain of that. She looked down at Nim, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was ending. There are places that will take refugees, charity stations on Outer Rim, but conditions there, she trailed off. Sung had heard about those places. Overcrowded, dangerous, barely survivable. People went there as a last resort. What about, he struggled to find options. Asylum, protection status. Based on what? I am not fleeing persecution. I am just poor widow who no one wants. She finally looked at him, and her large eyes were liquid with unshed tears. You have been kind, kinder than anyone, but there is no solution. In 30 days, Nim and I will leave. We will find somewhere. We will survive. The resignation in her voice broke something in Sung. This was wrong. Vixla was hardworking, talented, and doing everything right. But the system didn't care about that. It cared about risk and cost and efficiency. Oh, there has to be something, he said. There is not. I have looked. I have researched. She stood carefully, adjusting Nim. I should prepare dinner. Workers will be hungry soon. She walked back to the stove, and Sung watched her mechanically begin chopping vegetables. Her 4 arms moved through the familiar motions, but there was no life in it now. That night, D-Sung couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, staring at the photo of Haewon and Bora. Their smiling faces looked back at him from a world that no longer existed. He'd run from loss for 12 years, buried himself in work and isolation and the comfortable numbness of frontier station life. He'd convinced himself that not caring was the same as not hurting. But these past months with Vixla and Nim had shown him the truth. Not caring didn't stop the pain. It just made life meaningless. And now he had a choice. He could let Vixla and Nim disappear like everyone else he'd lost, or he could fight. He pulled up his computer and started researching. Immigration law, permit requirements, asylum protocols. He read through hours of dense legal text, following links down rabbit holes of bureaucratic procedure. At 3 in the morning, he found something. A clause in joint custody law between humans and Telkari. If a Telkari child had a legal guardian who was a station citizen, the child's parent automatically qualified for permanent residency to maintain family unity. The guardian had to prove genuine relationship and commitment to the child's welfare, but the law was clear. If D-Sung became Nim's legal guardian, Vixla could stay. He sat back, heart pounding. It was possible. Difficult, unprecedented, but possible. It would mean paperwork, tribunal hearings, scrutiny. It would mean opening himself up to questions about his past, his losses, his motivations. It would mean admitting to the universe that he cared about someone again. It would mean taking responsibility for a child. The thought terrified him, but losing Vixla and Nim terrified him more. By morning, he'd made his decision. He found Vixla preparing breakfast. She looked exhausted, her skin dull and lifeless. Nim was awake in her carrier, those amber eyes watching everything with that too-aware gaze. "I found something," D-Sung said without preamble. "A way you can stay." Vixla's hands paused. "What way?" "If Nim has a legal guardian who's a station citizen, you automatically qualify for permanent residency. Family unity law." "I do not understand. Nim has no guardian. I am her mother." "I could be her guardian, joint custody arrangement. It's legal under Human Telkari Treaty." He took a breath. "I'd adopt her, officially. That makes us family, which makes you family, which means you get permanent status." Vixla stared at him. Her skin shifted through several colors rapidly. Shock, confusion, fear, hope. "You would do that, adopt my child." "If you agree, it's your choice." "But why? This is huge responsibility. Huge risk for you." D-Sung met those large, reflective eyes. "Because I don't want to lose you both. Because you've given me something I thought was dead. Because," he looked at Nim, "because she deserves better than a refugee station, and you deserve to stay somewhere safe." Tears fell from Vixla's eyes, silver against her silver skin. This would bind you to us, legally, financially, forever. I know. Corporate will fight. They will say it is fraud. Let them. I've got documentation of our time together, witness statements from workers, medical records of me paying for Nim's treatment. I can prove this is genuine. Why? Vixla asked again, her voice breaking. Why risk everything for us? Sung thought about HeHFY, about Bora, about 12 years of running from connection and meaning. Because hiding from loss isn't living, and I'm tired of just existing. Vixla set down her knife and crossed to him, all four of her arms wrapped around him in a Telkari embrace. You are saving us, she whispered. Again. We'll save each other. The next week was a blur of paperwork. Sung filed the adoption petition with Station Legal Services. He gathered evidence, work records, witness statements, photos of him with Nim. He wrote a detailed explanation of his intentions and his commitment to Nim's welfare. The response was swift. T-Min filed an objection within 48 hours. Fraudulent arrangement designed to circumvent immigration law, his complaint stated. Station manager Sung has no genuine relationship with the minor in question. This is a transparent attempt to exploit a legal loophole for inappropriate purposes. A tribunal hearing was scheduled. 3 judges, 2 human and 1 Telkari, would review the evidence and make a decision. If they ruled against Sung, the adoption would be denied, and Vixla's deportation would proceed. The workers on the station heard about it immediately. News traveled fast in small communities. The day before the hearing, Gil-Su approached Sung. The man looked uncomfortable. Boss, Gil-Su said, I heard about the hearing tomorrow. What about it? I'm testifying for you. Sung stared. You. Look, I was a jerk about Vixla, said things I shouldn't have. You were right to call me on it. Gil-Su shifted his weight. But I've watched you with them these past months. Anyone can see it's real. You care about that kid, about both of them. That inspector is wrong, and I'm going to say so. You don't have to. Yeah, I do, to make up for being an ass. Gil-Su nodded and walked away. Over the next few hours, 7 more workers approached Sung with the same message. They were coming to the hearing. They would testify on his behalf. The community that Vixla had helped build was coming together to protect her. That evening, Sung sat with Vixla in the empty cafeteria after the dinner rush. Nim was on the table between them, playing with a soft toy Sung had bought her. I am frightened, Vixla admitted, if tribunal says no. They won't. You cannot know that. No, but I believe it. He reached over and let Nim grab his finger with her tiny hand. Those amber eyes looked up at him with complete trust. I believe that doing the right thing matters, that protecting someone who needs protection matters. That's human, isn't it? We don't abandon people. It is more than human, it is good. Vixla's skin brightened. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that you gave us hope. You reminded me that universe has kindness in it. The universe has you in it. That's kindness enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Nim play. Outside the windows, the stars of Keshiar night sky glittered cold and distant. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either they'd become a family officially, or they'd be torn apart by bureaucracy and fear. But tonight they were together, and that was enough. D-Sung looked at the photo on his desk later that night. Haewon and Bora smiled back at him, frozen in a perfect moment from 13 years ago. I'm doing something scary tomorrow, he told them quietly. I'm choosing to care about someone again, about two someones. I think you'd approve. The photo didn't answer, but somehow, D-Sung felt like he had their blessing. He'd spent 12 years running from love because love meant loss. But maybe love also meant the courage to risk loss again. Maybe that was what made humans special. Not that they never fell, but that they kept getting back up, kept trying, kept caring even when it hurt. Tomorrow, he'd prove that to a room full of judges. Tomorrow, he'd fight for his family. Because that's what family meant, fighting for each other no matter the odds. The tribunal chamber was smaller than D-Sung expected. Just a plain room with a long table where 3 judges sat, reviewing documents on their screens. 2 humans, 1 woman named Jai-woo and 1 man named Chang-min, both looking stern and professional. The third was Tel-Kari, an older male named Velton whose silver skin had the deep patina of age. D-Sung sat at one table with Vixla beside him. Nim was in her carrier, unusually quiet as if sensing the importance of the moment. At the opposing table sat Team Min with a corporate lawyer named Young Suk, a woman with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. Behind them, filling every available seat, were workers from the station. Gil Soo, Dr. Hyun Woo, and at least 20 others who had taken time off their shifts to be there. Judge Jai-woo called the hearing to order. We're here to review the adoption petition filed by station manager D-Sung for the minor Nim, daughter of Vixla. The petitioner seeks joint custody under Human Tel-Kari family unity law. Corporate has filed an objection claiming this is a fraudulent arrangement. We'll hear evidence from both sides. Young Suk stood first. She was precise and cold, laying out the corporate argument with practiced efficiency. The timeline is suspicious. Vixla was hired only 3 months ago. Station manager D-Sung had no prior relationship with either the mother or child. Yet within weeks of a negative permit review, he suddenly files for adoption. This is clearly a manipulation of immigration law to circumvent corporate policy. She pulled up records on the main screen. Furthermore, the financial arrangement is questionable. The manager paid 800 credits for medical treatment, which suggests a transactional relationship. He's buying his way into a guardianship to exploit a loophole. Those medical bills saved my daughter's life, Vixla said quietly. That's not a question for you right now, Judge Jaiwu said gently but firmly. You'll have your chance to speak. Young Suk continued. Corporate policy exists to protect station resources and ensure stability. Allowing this adoption sets a dangerous precedent. Any manager could claim guardianship of any alien child to bypass immigration controls. The system breaks down. She sat down, looking satisfied. Judge Changmin looked at Di-sung. Your response? Di-sung stood, his heart hammering. He'd prepared a speech, bullet points and legal arguments. But looking at Vixla's fearful face and Nim's trusting eyes, the prepared words vanished. I lost my family 12 years ago, he said simply. My wife Bora and my daughter HeHFY died in a transport crash. I spent the next 12 years running from that pain. I took jobs in places where I wouldn't have to feel anything, where I could just exist without really living. He saw Judge Jaiwu's expression soften slightly. Then Vixla showed up needing work and I hired her because I needed a cook. That's all it was supposed to be, a business transaction. He looked at Nim. But her daughter has these eyes, amber with gold flecks, same as my HeHFY had. And every time I looked at Nim it hurt. It reminded me of everything I'd lost. This doesn't explain the adoption, Young Suk interrupted. I'm getting there. Di-sung kept his voice steady. At first I avoided them, did my job, stayed distant, but over weeks I saw how hard Vixla worked, how she cared for Nim while doing everything asked of her, how she faced each day despite losing her mate and being rejected by his family. And I saw Nim growing, watching the world with these bright, aware eyes. He paused. One day Nim got sick, high fever. Vixla came to my door terrified because Telkari infants are fragile and she had no money for treatment. I didn't think about it. I just paid for the medicine because that's what you do when a child needs help. That's human. That's the transaction we mentioned, Young Suk said to the judges. No, Di-sung turned to face her directly. That's compassion, something corporate spreadsheets don't measure. I paid those bills because Nim needed medicine, not to buy anything. He turned back to the judges. After that, things changed. Vixla and I talked more. She told me about Telkari culture. I told her about Earth, about my family. She helped me remember that the pain of loss doesn't mean you should stop caring. It means you loved something worth losing. Judge Velton, the Telkari, leaned forward. What changed when you learned of the deportation order? I realized I didn't want to lose them, not because of some corporate policy that treats people like numbers. Vixla and Nim had become part of my life. They'd helped me heal from something I thought would never heal. He looked at Nim. When I hold her, I remember what it felt like to be a father. When I talk with Vixla, I remember what it felt like to connect with someone. They didn't replace what I lost. They reminded me I was still capable of caring. So you filed for adoption to keep them on station, Judge Changmin said. I filed for adoption because Nim deserves a stable home and legal protection, because Vixla deserves to raise her daughter somewhere safe, and because I want to be part of their family. He met the judge's eyes. Is it convenient that adoption solves the immigration problem? Yes, but that doesn't make it fraud. It makes it a solution that benefits everyone. Young Suk stood again. The court should note that the petitioner has no experience raising Telkari children. He doesn't know their culture, their biology, their needs. This adoption cannot serve the child's best interest when the guardian is ignorant of basic Telkari requirements. Before Sung could respond, Velton spoke. His voice was deep and resonant. I would like to ask Vixla some questions. Vixla stood, all four arms trembling slightly. You are willing to share custody of your daughter with this human? Velton asked. Yes. Why? In Telkari culture, mother-child bond is sacred. Sharing custody with outsider is highly unusual. Because Sung has proven himself worthy. Vixla's voice grew stronger. He defended me when others mocked me. He paid for Nim's medicine without hesitation. He learned how to hold her properly, how to read her color changes, how to soothe her. He asks questions about Telkari traditions and listens to answers. He sees my daughter as person, not burden. And if he makes mistakes, humans do not naturally understand Telkari needs. Then I will teach him as I have been teaching him. Vixla looked at Sung with fierce pride. In Telkari culture we have concept called Telvara. It means chosen family. Those who prove themselves through actions, not blood. Sung is Telvara to us. That is highest honor we can give. Velton's skin shifted to a lighter shade. Approval, thank you. Judge Jaiwu looked at the crowd behind them. I understand several station workers wish to testify. Gilsu stood first. He looked uncomfortable in clean clothes, clearly nervous. I'm Gilsu. I work mining ops. I wasn't nice about Vixla at first. Said some things I shouldn't have. Boss set me straight. What changed your mind? Judge Changmin asked. Watching them together, boss with the kid, I mean. He's gentle with her, patient. You can see he cares, and the food got better. Gilsu smiled awkwardly. Vixla makes this spiced grain thing that's amazing. Everyone's happier now. Station feels different, like a community, not just a workplace. Dr. Hyun-woo spoke next. I treated Nim when she had the fever. I've watched the manager with her during follow-up appointments. He knows her medical history, asks appropriate questions, follows all care instructions. He's educated himself on Telkari infant development. That's not fraud. That's responsible parenting. One by one, workers stood and testified. They spoke about the cafeteria becoming a gathering place, about D-Sung's character, about how they'd seen him hold Nim, talk to her, care for her, about how Vixla's presence had improved station morale. Young Suk tried to dismiss it. These people are the manager's employees. They're biased. They're also witnesses to daily reality, Judge Jaiwoo said. Their testimony matters. Finally, the judges reviewed the evidence in private. D-Sung, Vixla, and the workers waited in the hallway. Nim had fallen asleep, exhausted by the tension. "Whatever happens," Vixla said quietly, "thank you for fighting. It's not over yet." 30 minutes later, they were called back in. Judge Jaiwoo spoke. "We've reviewed all evidence and testimony. This is an unusual case. The timeline is short and the circumstances are complicated. However, several factors are clear." D-Sung's heart pounded so hard he could hear it. First, there's substantial evidence that station manager D-Sung has formed a genuine relationship with the minor Nim. Medical records, witness testimony, and documented interactions all support this. Second, testimony from Vixla herself confirms she trusts the petitioner and believes the adoption serves her daughter's best interest. Third, multiple witnesses confirm the positive impact of this family arrangement on the broader community. Judge Jaiwoo looked directly at D-Sung. While the timing may be convenient, convenience doesn't equal fraud. Sometimes legal solutions and moral solutions align. This appears to be one of those cases. "The adoption petition is approved," Judge Chang-min said. "Joint custody is granted under Human Telkari Family Unity Law. Vixla's permit is hereby converted to permanent residency status." The room erupted. Workers cheered. Gil-soo let out a whoop. Vixla collapsed into her chair, all four arms covering her face as she sobbed with relief. D-Sung just stood there stunned. They'd won. Nim was legally his daughter now. Vixla could stay. Young Suk and T-Min gathered their materials in angry silence and left without a word. Judge Velton approached Vixla and spoke to her in Telkari. She responded, and they had a brief conversation. Then Velton turned to D-Sung. "She tells me you are Telvara. This is sacred thing in our culture." He extended two of his four hands. "I honor your choice. You are good father. I'm going to try to be." That is all any parent can do. The next weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, legal processing, and adjustments. D-Sung officially became Nim's guardian. His quarters were rearranged to accommodate a child. Vixla received her permanent residency documentation. The cafeteria continued to thrive. If anything, it became even more popular. Workers brought friends from other stations to try Vixla's cooking. The space became known throughout the sector as the best place to eat on any frontier station. D-Sung found himself settling into a rhythm he'd thought was lost forever. Morning routines that included helping with Nim, conversations over meal prep, evening walks where he'd carry Nim and point out stars while Vixla explained Telkari constellations. They never defined what they were to each other. Not romantic, not quite family in the traditional sense, but something deeper. Partners in raising Nim, friends who'd fought through loss together. Telvara. 4 months after the tribunal, on the anniversary of HeHFY and Bora's death, D-Sung took Nim outside to the observation deck. The station's massive windows showed the sunset over Keshiar 9's dusty landscape. He held Nim carefully, supporting her head as she gazed at the colors. At 10 months old, she was getting heavier, more active. Her skin shifted through shades of blue and pink as she watched the sky, curious and happy. "There's someone you should know about," D-Sung said softly. "Her name was HeHFY. She was my daughter before you came into my life. She had eyes like yours, amber with gold flecks." Nim made a soft sound, reaching toward the window. "She died when she was 7, along with her mother, Bora. It hurt so much that I ran away from everything that reminded me of them. I thought that was healing, but it wasn't. It was just hiding." The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Then you came along, and your eyes, they brought all that pain back, but they also brought something else. They reminded me that love is worth the risk, that caring about someone, even knowing you might lose them, is what makes life meaningful." He looked down at Nim, who was watching him intently, her skin a soft pink. "You didn't replace HeHFY. Nobody could, but you helped me find my way back to the person I was when she was alive. The person who knew how to love without fear." He smiled, and tears ran down his face. "Your eyes brought me back, little one. They saved me." Nim reached up and touched his face with her small hand, exploring the tears. Her forehead shifted to a gentle blue, curious about his emotion but not frightened by it. D-Sung held her close and watched the sun disappear below the horizon. Behind him, he heard the door open. Vixla joined them, standing beside him in comfortable silence. "She would have liked you," D-Sung said. HeHFY. "Yes, Bora too. They would have approved of all this." Vixla's skin brightened. "I hope so. I hope they know you are happy again." "I think they do." They stood together as the stars began to appear. A human, a Telkari widow, and a baby who had accidentally become the bridge between loss and healing. D-Sung thought about all the years he'd wasted running from pain, all the time he'd spent convinced that not caring was safer than loving. He'd been wrong about so much. But he was right about this. Right here, right now, with these two people who'd become his family against all odds. This was worth fighting for. This was worth living for. And somewhere, he thought, Haewon and Bora were smiling. Because their love hadn't ended. It had just transformed into something new. Something that allowed him to open his heart again and let new people in. That was the real gift. Not forgetting the past, but letting it teach him how to embrace the future. Nim fell asleep in his arms as the stars grew brighter. Vixla hummed a Telkari lullaby, and D-Sung felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. A peace. Not the numbness of running away, but the genuine peace of being exactly where he was supposed to be. With his family. His Telvara. His reason for coming back to life.